actually long overdue. As a criminal defense attorney, I can't help but defend the police department today because, honestly, I believe as a society and politicians with due respect, we've been dumping these issues on police departments. What the job of the police department is to obey the guidelines that are given by the city. And I would submit that really they don't have that much input with that in that regard. I would request that the task force include Rudy Reyes, who is a longtime patient advocate, also Mr. Richard Admonson, who operates the Green Door Collective, and I've also offered my services to you as an attorney that has been involved in the civil lawsuit against the county, as well as defending people in criminal cases. I think this is a humanitarian issue here. We're dealing with patients that need their medication, and through bigotry, prejudice, and possibly money interests, they're being neglected. So I would applaud you for setting up the task force. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Peggy Joy Greenfield, followed by Libba Jackson D'Ambrosi. Ms. Greenfield, welcome.
Good afternoon. I'd just like to say that I'm a medical marijuana patient. I have glaucoma. I've had uveitis in my left eye all of my life. I've used Pret-A-Forte, which is a medical prescription, which the side effects or contraindications are glaucoma and cataracts. So now I have glaucoma. The pressure comes up in my eye with marijuana. I can get it down in 2 to 3 days. With Pret-A-Forte, it takes me 2 to 3 months, and I totally lose my sight. So I just ask you to consider all these aspects for patients. UC San Diego, I noticed in yesterday's paper, is doing a diabetes-related pain study and using cannabis or medical marijuana. So I have the article if any of you would like to follow up and see what they're doing. But we have guidelines that have been set out by the Attorney General's office in Sacramento, and they've really done all of the work. So I ask you to consider the state guidelines and let's follow them. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Jackson D'Ambrosi, followed by Rudy Reyes.
Afternoon, council members. Thanks for this opportunity. I applaud PS and NS for including different constituencies in the makeup of the task force, and I think prevention is an aspect that really needs to be considered. I urge you to make sure that prevention people are included. They have the data and the personal stories on how marijuana in the community is affecting youth. The attempt to medicalize marijuana already has negative impact on youth. And as a response to the previous speaker, the Attorney General's guidelines don't have to be implemented by a city. They're already in place, and they're an interpretation of the law. So people who were following the rules for collectives and cooperatives could be operating now. It's just the problem is that all the dispensaries say that they're cooperatives and collectives, and then they sell marijuana. It's a store. They walk in, they tell you where to get a recommendation. Those recommendations can be bought for adjusted amounts, discounted prices for longer duration, or actually the opposite. You pay more for how much you want marijuana. I was, on the way over here, I was thinking it's like dipping a rotten apple in caramel and then hoping no one will notice. This really, it upsets me because it's not about sick people. The people who think that marijuana can help them can probably find it. They also, under the law, have the authority to grow it. Their caregivers can grow it, but there's supposed to be a relationship between a primary caregiver and a patient. So I have a couple big questions. What happens if recommendations for marijuana are written by a doctor who loses his license. No one is monitoring how many recommendations there are out there. No one is monitoring, nor could they monitor, whether you take that same recommendation to another storefront. So that means people could keep using that same recommendation and be a member of many, many different dispensaries. And that's dangerous. I think it's a fantasy to rely on law enforcement to shut down dispensaries. I hope the zoning tool works. LA has possibly 1,000 dispensaries operating now, between 600 and 1,000. Nobody really knows. And it's a too heavy burden on law enforcement to solve this problem. I also can't really think of a good location for one, though. Obviously, you don't want it near schools. You don't want giant signage. It's not analogous to alcohol. If you try to force it into those areas, it'll be a problem. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Rudy Reyes, followed by Pastor Wayne.
My name is Rudy Reyes. Actually, I'm Reverend Rudy Reyes. I just got a reverendship about 2 months ago. I thought that lady was pro. I'm going to address a lot of her issues. America needs to grow up. We got to stop hiding behind kids and tell our kids the truth. This is no worse than alcohol, and it's a little bit over tobacco. If you were to tell them that, they would realize that it can be your ebb and it can be your flow. In other words, it can be the thing that ruins you or what makes you too. This has to be looked at as an adult. For her to say that this isn't a patient issue, she's standing there as a person who obviously hasn't been through pains, obviously hasn't dealt with anything wrong with their own life. She's just trying to criticize and make herself have these, anti-comments during a pro section. That's just an attack. A lot of people aren't seeing that. It's just an attack. Going on, I've run for county supervisor with this as my issue. I've run for Santee City Council with this as my issue. Politics-wise, it has not been an issue. We've made it an issue as politicians. It's time to get over it. It's time for us to grow up too. This was a task force which was established, 6 years ago? And we're trying to reestablish it because it got pulled apart? It's time for us to move on. It's time for us to grow up. We're at that point. The only reason why I got involved, I'm a teacher. I was a middle school teacher most of my life. I was very anti-marijuana. I was a DARE teacher, one of those types. And then I got involved in real bad fires. And I was burned really badly. And in UCSD, I was prescribed medical marijuana to help me, to benefit my life, rather than the morphine, which I was slowly ODing on. Now I live quality life. I've run for political seats. I've gotten 2 degrees in archaeology, and I'm a reverend. I'm making things better for others. Look at the possibility. They're going to try to hide, and they're going to try to make you be misinformed with the ideology that this is horrible. No, this just needs guidance. This needs really a method for us all to be under the same, levels of how we're going to establish ourselves as San Diego, and we can move on. Because if you go to one of those other cities where this has already been moved on, like Oakland, they're taxing it. They're making money off of it. This is not an issue there. This is way an old non-issue. But because we're here in San Diego and because we've held out so long and because we have the people like the mayor, who his representative actually left just a little while ago. And what I would like to know in my last few minutes is, as zoning goes, what's the difference between this and a pharmacy? A pharmacy gives out pills, prescription, medication. It's the same thing. Zoning-wise, it should be the exact same thing. I don't see the problem there. I ask you guys to ask the same question. Thank you for the help. Thank you for anything you guys can do in regards to this. Because as a patient, those of us who have really been there, we need this, and we know the need. So I thank you for making this step.
Thank you, sir.